everyone. Welcome. We are so excited to have you here for this. I am personally excited because this is very much on my radar. I'm almost 8 months pregnant with a second boy and have a 4-year-old. So I need all of these tips from Brittany. Just very quickly, I'm Lily Walla, the founder and CEO of Auggie. We are a community for parents, a shop of curated recommendations that you all share in the community. And then we host a ton of these awesome virtual events with experts like Brittany. So, Brittany, I know you have a whole presentation going. I'm excited for you to introduce yourself. I will go off video, but if you need me to moderate the chat, I will be here to do that. So, people can
Great.
free to drop their questions in the Q&A or in the chat, and we'll treat it
Yep.
like Q&A. And we'll make sure to get time for those at the end. Brittany has a hard stop in what, 30 minutes?
35, 40. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll get into it. And on that note, Brittany, take it away.
I'm taking it away. And you can see my screen, right? It has the
Yes.
green. Okay. I'm like so bad at this stuff. I can never tell what's happening. Okay. So, yes. Hi, guys. Thanks for being here. I know some people are going to be watching this later. So I will introduce myself very, very briefly. I did not need to put in 2 pictures, but I just got new branding photos. So I had to
They're
put them both
beautiful.
in. Thank you. I think so. Biased. So I am a potty. So potty and parenting are kind of my secondary priorities in my business. I'm mainly a sleep consultant, but I also do potty and parenting consulting for families as well. So birth to age 7 is really my wheelhouse. And I have both custom plans where a family will hire me, to help their specific child with sleep issues, potty stuff. And I have online courses as well. And I have a podcast called The Snooze Button, which is all things sleep, potty, parenting, just being a human, just funny stuff. And yeah, I've worked with a lot of people at this point. So I love doing these events with Auggie. And the one we're going to talk about today is specific to sibling rivalry and big feelings, kid feelings. And I will say at a high level that a lot of what I talk to parents about, and like my clients know this, is it's very much, I call it a do less. So what's probably going to be different about the things you'll be hearing from me, from what you've maybe heard in other places, is I'm not going to give you like a bunch of scripts that you like have to say when your kid's having a tantrum. I think of this as stuff that it would actually be easier for me to do that and just give you like a list of things and be like, that's going to work every time. And it would feel easier to you. Like, all I have to do is say this one thing. But the reality is, that's for us. It's not for your child. It's not actually going to help them that much. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to tell you is going to sound more open-ended and is going to take you longer to implement, but it's what's actually going to have like a long-lasting impact on your kids' behavior, like with you and with each other. So we'll talk about like when sibling rivalry specifically tends to pop up the most in my experience, and like what we're not going to focus on, because I think that's as important as what we are going to focus on. And then a lot of it is the stuff that you guys can do as parents to prepare for when these moments happen. And then obviously I will give you some sort of in the moment tangible ideas. And then after a big blow up, your kids get in a huge fight, or you and your child are in an argument and they're having a meltdown, toddlerhood. What are we doing afterwards to kind of reflect and make it better the next time? So we will get into all of it now. So first thing, real talk. Got to say this first. Like, good or bad, having little kids, multiple, is hard. Like, it's unique to each family. It's changing constantly. Once you have one thing figured out, they're suddenly in a new phase, but it's fleeting at the same time. So I always want to start with like, give yourself some grace, right? Because everyone has a very different like life, right? Like, it's really easy to compare yourself. Like, you see someone else at the park and you're like, oh my God, she said that script so well. And like, her kid stopped crying. You have no idea if that's the first time that kid has ever stopped crying. You don't know what that mom's life is like. So just know that if you're in a season right now where you're like, I'm not sure I signed up for the right thing, like this is not the vibe, that's going to end. And if it's awesome, enjoy that too. And know that you might have a hard moment down the road, but like, you're going to have the tools to manage it. We all have different priorities, resources. And that's actually why I think with parenting, even more so than sleep and potty, I try to keep things relatively open-ended, because I actually think that as parents, like, leaning into your core values and what's important to you is more important than anything else. It's not like if you don't do it this exact way, it's bad, right? That's a big thing to me. And I want to talk briefly about what I would call like the sibling stress zone. So these are the times that I will most often see kids who maybe their behavior has been pretty good otherwise, have an issue with a sibling when it's not something tied to like, a developmental leap and they are just being a pre-toddler and they're being a little crazy. So it's often when a mom is pregnant. And even if they don't understand pregnancy or you're not even showing, kids pick up on subtleties, right? So, like, you're throwing up a lot, you're really tired, or like you seem sort of out of it, or you have suddenly new priorities. So, pregnancy can sometimes cause some of these behavior kind of backslides. And then, interestingly, obviously, every kid is different. So, these things could happen anytime, but I will often see that it's actually not when a baby arrives that if there's going to be some sort of issue with their sibling coming up, it's not usually right then. It's usually when the baby's a couple of months old. That's a very common time for my sleep clients to come back to me and be like, everything's been great, but like all of a sudden, he's doing XYZ. And my take on it, anecdotally, is that they kind of see what's going on after a while. And like, it was sort of a novelty, right? Like maybe the parents gave them a present from the baby and they're like, you're such a big boy or a big girl. And like, it's all kind of fun and exciting. Grandma's visiting. And then a few months later, it's like, okay, my parents are like obsessed with this person and like they cry a lot and like my mom's feeding them and suddenly they're like not so into the sibling, right? So that's a really common time. And then once baby is moving, because some kids, they're sort of indifferent to the baby or they enjoy them when they're like an immobile object. And then all of a sudden, this baby is crawling over and grabbing their block. And they're like, wait a second, this is actually a formidable opponent. They do not like it. So that's a very common time for things to start to come up. And then also, kind of like the last one, and of course, I'm going to speak mainly to the first few years of life. Of course, there's things that happen when kids are older. But once both kids are old enough to have like responsibilities, different friends, like maybe one's in school, and they're starting to understand, like, I have a place in this family. I'm the middle kid, or like my brother is littler than me and he gets to do these things. And sort of that understanding comes into play. So in all of these scenarios, there might be no impact on the siblings, but if there is one, it's not always one specific thing. So sometimes, and I'll see this often with like toddlers when there's a new baby around, that one that's a couple of months in, where they like revert back to wanting to be a baby, right? Like maybe they don't take a passy anymore and suddenly they want a passy, they want to get in the crib, they want you to hold them, right? And sometimes it is tied to the parent, like they're very clingy to one parent or they're very resistant to one, right? Like some kids are like, okay, mom, you are like gone to me now. I only want dad because you're clearly with the newborn, that type of thing. And then, of course, like the regular challenges. So, like some type of like backstep with their sleep, feeding, like suddenly they're really picky. They will only eat strawberries. Potty stuff can come up, having accidents. And then just general behavioral stuff, right? They're fighting, they don't like the baby, that type of thing. So, these are really common times. If you see this happening, at these times, it's really, really normal. So when it comes up, like, what are we not going to do? So I think this is, like I said, perhaps as important as what we do want to focus on. So the one thing that we don't want to do is like stop them from feeling the way they feel. I think sometimes we almost forget that like they're little people, they're people, right? Like everybody gets jealous sometimes. They're envious of somebody, they're comparing themselves to their friends. So you have to remember like these are human emotions and we're not trying to like gaslight them, for lack of a better word, and be like, why are you so upset? Like, you love your brother, like be nice to him. Like, yeah, I get it, like you used to be by yourself and now you have a brother and like that sucks for you. Like, if my husband got a new wife, I wouldn't be thrilled about it either, right? So like I always like to think of that example. So we're thinking about how to manage it, not to like try to shut it down and tell them that they can't feel this way, right? And the other thing that we're not trying to do is make everything equal. Like I would really try to resist doing things like counting out like everybody gets exactly 12 M&Ms. Like everybody, like if you buy one kid a stuffy and the sibling likes it, you have to buy that same stuffy for the other kid, right? Like making sure that things feel fair is important, right? But fair doesn't always mean equal, right? Like it might be fair that your 3-year-old gets to like pick out their own cup and they can eat or drink from an open cup or something. And the 1-year-old like hasn't mastered that skill yet. So when you're at a restaurant, you can't give them a regular cup. Like that's not equal, right? But it's fair. They can't like break the glass in the restaurant. That's like a really silly example. But I think having that in your head too. And I think there are things you do want to be conscious of. Like one little trick that I have for those of you who are new to having multiple kids is when I'm planning my kids' birthdays and Christmases, I actually have a spreadsheet because I'll see things like throughout the year and I'll be like, oh, my son, like oldest, would really like that. And I do put them in a spreadsheet to see like what gifts I'm giving everyone, just to make sure that I don't inadvertently, like, one of my kids is really into something that I know, my youngest is like really into Taylor Swift. So am I. So it could be very easy for me to just like buy her a bunch of like sparkly cowboy boots. So I have to be conscious, like, what is my middle son into? Am I getting him about the same kind of thing? So like that is one thing to kind of keep yourself in check. But in general, on a day-to-day basis, do not fixate on everything being exactly the same, because you'll go insane and it's not realistic for life, right? So in terms of setting the stage so that, again, we're not trying to prevent big feelings from happening. We're not trying to prevent them from having conflict as siblings, but we're doing things on the front end just to make those moments occur less frequently. And when they do, that you feel more confident managing them and they're not as severe as maybe they've been in the past. So, one really important thing, if you're parenting with someone else, if at all possible, parents being on the same page, and it doesn't have to be exact, but it's like at a high level, what are your family values and what is important to you guys as a family? And it can be huge things like, I want my kids to be inclusive. Or it could be small things like, we really value having family dinner on the weekends, right? It like can be all across the spectrum. But I would suggest like sitting down, and my husband and I have done this. As a caveat too, I'm going to give all of you, like everyone who signed up for this event, I'm going to give you free access to my house rules and family values spreadsheets. I actually sell them, and it's in my client membership program. But I will be sending you guys an email probably tomorrow with a code to get those for free. But like sitting down and establishing, and maybe make about 10 of them, your family's house rules and family values. So these are totally separate things, but having them, it puts you and your spouse, if you have one, on the same page. Like, okay, so we're both on the same page that no balls in the house. That's a big one for me, because I have two of my three kids are boys and they would throw baseballs like through the window if I let them. So you have established together, like, we're both saying we're going to enforce this rule, right? So these are our family rules, or sorry, house rules, but the family values are intended to be bigger picture things to make your child feel like they're a part of a team and what is important to you guys. And I think that is huge in managing behavior, because if as a family, you guys, for instance, one of our values in our family is we respect other people's time, right? So that ties into how I behave in the morning. If one of my kids is lollygagging, I'm like, we're not going to be late. It's important that you're on time and that your teacher is able to start her class. My son's in first grade, on time, and everyone is sitting down. And in our family, we show up on time. And that really helps when you eventually get the pushback of like, so and so is always late. That's fine if so and so is. In our family, we show up on time because we respect other people's time, right? And house rules could be something like no throwing balls in the house, or like you take off your shoes when you come inside. So it means it kind of puts a visual angle on like you and your spouse. And if you have like a nanny, like we walked through it with our nanny as well to make sure she understood everything. Like, we only eat food at the table, so that your kids can see it. And like, it's funny, like my middle son sometimes will be like, I want new house rules. And he'll like get annoyed because he wants to throw a ball in the house. But it's making it very clear what's expected of you. Because I think as parents, you have these moments where like, you didn't really care that your kids were eating on the couch yesterday, but today it's spaghetti. And now you're pissed because there's spaghetti all over the couch. But that's sort of unfair to your kids, right? Like, you never established that that was a rule. And so they're like, to you, it makes sense. Well, yeah, you can have an apple, but you can't have spaghetti. They don't understand that. So you making a rule and saying you can't eat food on the couch makes things very clear. And we're hopefully eliminating at least the frequency of those things happening. And then whatever those things are that you've established, your house rules and your family values, that you and your partner are modeling those things and bringing them up, both in like good, happy times, but also in the hard times. So in the happy times, that would mean something like, you guys are sitting at dinner, you're all laughing, and one of your kids is being silly, telling a story. You're like, I just love that we always have dinner together. Like, this is my favorite time of the day, is like being with you guys, right? You're like reinforcing that's one of your family values. But it also comes up in hard times. As your kids get older, this to me has become, my oldest is now 8, has become more and more important. Like, he has friends now who have iPads, who have Nintendo Switch, all this stuff. And he was crying a few weeks ago because I'm not getting him that stuff anytime soon. And I said to him, that's okay that so-and-so has it. That's, part of their family values, and that's what they choose to do. In our family, we don't have iPads in the house. You can watch TV on the big screen, right? So you're like reinforcing that stuff. And I think with siblings especially, I think it really matters, because when you sort of establish like this is how our family operates and here's what's important to us, it's making your kids a part of a team, right? So they are not adversaries and rivals. Sometimes they will feel like rivals, but they are a part of the team together. Your kids are walking to school together and we are going to be on time because that's what our family does. And again, the older they get, the more important it is. So it's a great thing to start doing
And
now.
just quickly, Brittany, how old does a
Yeah.
child have to be to effectively communicate house rules and family values?
I think you can do it at any age. Like one thing that's interesting is, especially if anybody ends up with a child who's more verbal than an older child, you realize how much more they understand than they can say typically, which I realized when I had my third and she was talking in like full sentences, like a year before her brothers. So I would keep enforcing it right out of the gate, but I would say around 2 is, especially for house rules, is completely fair to expect them to like start to understand it, even if it's hard for them to always do it. A 2-year-old can understand like no balls in house, balls outside, outside toys outside, inside toys inside. I think by 2 is totally appropriate. Yeah. You can tweak them as you go too. Um, and Lily, did that inspire any other questions?
Let me look. I think we're good for right now. Yep, we're good for right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and like anything else, it's like the earlier you establish it. I talk about this a lot with sleep. Like some of the things I teach my sleep clients in the baby stage, I tell them like this is helpful-ish right now, but this just being the framework you have about bedtime when they're 6 months old, I'm telling you, when they're 2, you're going to be so glad that this has just always been the way you do it, and you're not having to backtrack and be like, okay, bedtime has gotten absolutely insane. We need to like rein it in, right? Because this is just the only like reality your child has ever known is doing it that way.
Sorry,
So
Brittany,
same,
I lied. With
tell me.
a 4-year-old, do they
Yeah,
internalize guilt about occasionally not having good feelings about their new sibling?
it's possible. I would say maybe they wouldn't know that guilt is like they probably don't have the like capacity to understand guilt in that nuance, but they would understand feeling bad and not knowing why,
Got it.
right?
Yeah.
Like I definitely think there's the whole concept of like there are primary emotions and secondary ones. So even like anger is a secondary emotion. So anger is coming from a place of either like fear or shame, right? So if a kid is angry, or like an older, an adult is like someone yells at you, they're either afraid or they're ashamed.
Yeah.
Like if you actually like pull it back. So that's a thought process.
And then there is one more question. It's not
Yeah,
exactly so relevant to this, but
tell me.
do you recommend having the child meet the baby in the hospital, or is it best to do it at home?
I think that's a great example of like a very personal thing.
Yeah.
My I would say it's personal, but my personal take as a mom is I don't like it. Only because it's the baby or the toddler, I'm sorry, seeing their mom in a very unfamiliar setting while you're also introducing the baby. And then you also are going to have this expectation that, like, you see those videos of like the little girl in the perfect pink dress that says big sister and she's like kissing the baby. And you're like, you brought your toddler in and he like won't sit on your lap and is
Yeah.
screaming. And like, I feel like it's unfairly setting up the families to a degree. And then also the child then has to leave. And like, for the most part, their mom isn't coming with them. So it's like they're taken into this. I mean, hospitals are kind of scary for kids. I remember
Yeah.
being like freaked out by it as a kid. So they're in this scary place that smells bad. They're seeing their mom in like a hospital setting. There's this new infant, and then they have to leave and their mom is still there. I think it's a lot. So I'm making
Got
it
it.
sound more dramatic maybe than it is, but that's my take.
No, that makes complete sense. And then I guess just the follow up to that would be,
Yeah.
okay, so then if you are doing it in the home setting,
Yeah.
is it better for the kid to be home and the baby comes in, or for the baby to be there and the kid to come in?
I like the kid to be there and the baby comes in if you can. Again, I would say this is the type of thing where like don't overthink it. Like if your kid is out for a walk, you don't have to like hide in the car until they come in. Like it's not that deep. But
Yeah.
I do think, if I had to pick between the two, I think it's nice for it to feel like the toddler's territory and like we're introducing someone new to it versus like, hey, what's up? We actually replaced you. So you can go in the other room now because we have a new baby. Like I think It's a nice message
Great.
to
And
send.
then we're now inspiring questions on this topic. So I just got one directly to
Yeah.
me, but I am also curious about this.
Yeah.
And it's when you go to the hospital and this specific person's doing a scheduled C-section.
Yeah.
They'll be in the hospital for 3 nights.
Hmm.
What is the conversation that you're both having with your child leading up to that scheduled C-section, but also for the 3 days that you're there? Like, should you be FaceTiming or no?
Yeah.
And like showing the baby, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think my preference for that is leading up to it. So one like thing that I love parents to do, if you have time, and it's not a big deal if you don't have time to do it at this point, is to make a little board book. Like you can, I actually am doing a partnership with, what is this brand? This is one, Pinpoint Press. This is my daughter. I'm doing this thing with the Weed Talkers, but you like make a little book with, oh,
Yeah.
can you guys see me or can you only see
We can
the,
see both. We can see both.
okay, yeah. So you just have like these little books that you can make, and it's like you can put in it. It's actually meant to be like the story of the child, the toddler. Um, but it's sort of like subliminal messaging, like this is how this whole process works. It's like you were in my tummy, like I had to go to the hospital, and that's where you came out, and there was a nice doctor there, and like you came home and you cried a lot, and because that's your only way of talking, and like you ate from my body, and you're basically like showing them how this whole thing happens, so that when it happens for the baby, it's not as surprising.
Got it.
So I
I
think
love
doing that
that.
ahead of time is great because then you're telling them, like, remember you came out of my body. And I would say if you don't want to like go through that whole process, just showing them on your phone pictures, being like, look, there was mama and dada going to the hospital to have you. You were inside my tummy and you were about to come out. And like kind of reinforcing like this is the process. And then I'm a big fan of like no communicate, especially if, if it's one thing if you're like a NICU, on bed rest or something, but I wouldn't do any FaceTime or anything while you're there. I think most kids, it's like out of sight, out of mind to a degree. And
Yeah.
they'll probably do better if they're just hanging out with grandma, the nanny, whatever. You'll be home soon. Yeah.
Great. Okay, cool. That is so helpful.
Okay, good. And I'll do these last few slides, and then if there's other questions, there should be plenty of time. So other kind of prep thing, setting a positive tone. So there's this concept, if you guys have ever heard of like the Gottman Institute and the Gottmans, they are kind of like one of the leading thought people around relationships. So initially this was a concept for couples, like, a husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. But it can extend out to families as well, to kids. It's emotional piggy bank. So you're basically thinking about like your child's day in the sense of like money going in and out. So inputs going into the piggy bank are like positive things. Like, and it doesn't have to be something like you're sitting them down being like, you're just the greatest boy in the world, da 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 da. It's small stuff. It's like you give them a hug, you kiss them on the forehead as you walk by, you give them praise, you tell them they're doing a good job, you're laughing with them. More of those, you want more of those going into the piggy bank than what you're withdrawing, which could be something very like a bigger thing, like you're yelling at them, like dragging them out the door. But even things like constant questions or being like, you're supposed to hold it like this, do it this way, like sit down, even things like that, like small directives are outputs, right? So being really conscious of, especially if your child's going through a tough stage. I catch myself doing this. Like my middle son this morning, my mom is here visiting and she was like, Baker's doing da 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 da. And I could just see his face that he was feeling like shit. Like he was feeling like everyone's mad at me. And I was like, buddy, da da da. And we started talking about something else. And I could just see him start to like behave better and come back to life. He needed more inputs. He needed to stop being told what he was doing wrong, right? Even though he was doing bad stuff. So that's one big thing to be focusing on, and reinforcing, kind of going back to the family values thing, like teamwork and support, right? So not just that like your family is a team, but the siblings are too. So like asking them to help each other, congratulating them or thanking them for helping. Like, hey, do you want, especially when you have a new baby, like, hey, do you want to help me get the bottle ready? Because you're such a big boy. Like you're such a good helper. Like your brother, so lucky to have you. And like reinforcing we like each other, we're a team, and we're friends, all that good stuff. And then I want to touch very
A
quickly just
question
on,
came in about
yeah,
that, Brittany.
yeah.
So is it the toddler's baby? Like, is it like this is your baby? I think that's what this person is asking.
I mean, if you want to say it that way, you can. I would think of it more as like a new addition to the family. I would be careful about it being like you own them, I
Yeah.
guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's too nuanced to matter that much, but I definitely think leaning into the type of sibling they want to be is your best bet. So, meaning, like, I think we sometimes go into, I know I did, you go into having your second child sort of assuming this is how the older child's going to behave around them, and it's not always what it is. So some kids are completely indifferent. If they
Yeah.
are, let them be indifferent. You don't need to force them to be best friends. Like, it is basically a little like immobile object to them. So if you have a kid who's just like whatever, just let them be whatever. Don't try to force it. Don't be like, please hold the baby, sit here. Like, they can go play. It's fine. That'll
Okay,
come at some
cool.
point.
Yeah.
And if they are like they hate the baby, I would let that happen too. Like, I mean, obviously they can't like hit the baby or whatever, but you don't need to like enforce it. Some kids really like lean into the like helper, like they want to be the mom or dad. Like, if they do, awesome. Like, let them be the helper. But again, you don't need to like force it if they don't want to. Yeah,
Okay, cool. Thank
yeah,
you.
totally. Um, so for the morning, because this is the time, I think when you have one baby, especially as they've gotten older and you're like a little bit more of a veteran, things kind of sometimes get easier in the morning. And then when you have another kid, especially if you have a child in daycare or preschool, mornings become like the worst time of day. So my best advice for that is to do as much as you can, even if you're exhausted. Like, I will do this when I'm like bone tired. I'm like, I don't want to do anything right now, but I know that I will be feeling just as bad the next morning because I'm not a morning person. And then I'll have all my kids there like yelling in my ear. So you do as much as you can the night before that you're going to need to for your family. Find the stuff, do the whatever. And then as your kids get older, be conscious of trying to give them more independence. So even something like a snack drawer. So even for like a 3-year-old, you put things at eye level for them. And it's also giving them a job, which toddlers love to be helpers. They love to like do it grown up things and be in charge. So they get to pick their own snack. You might put, healthy snacks or things you think are appropriate. They get to pick their own snack, but that actually is going to help you. Like, all these like micro moments where you have to buckle their shoe and get their snack and find their socks. And so having these ways to like get them to do those things on their own is going to be amazing for you, especially when you're dealing with like a newborn and that type of thing. Um, okay, so in the moment, they are fighting, they are screaming, whatever is going on. It is first a bit of a do less. So this is where I'm saying I'm not going to give you a bunch of scripts that you have to say. If the kid's under 3, I would for the most part just let it happen, because we have to remind ourselves like their prefrontal, I always say this wrong, cortex is not it's not well developed. Like, they don't really know what's going on. I know they seem like they do, but it is appropriate for them to be having tantrums. So trying to like squash it is not going to work and is going to be unhelpful. So I truly would, if you give your kid the blue cup and you peel the banana and they don't want it to be peeled and there's no more bananas left and it's like, it is what it is, you can be like, okay, I'm sorry, buddy, I didn't know you don't want me to peel it. It's here if you want it. And like, just keep doing your thing. You don't have to like leave them in a locked room, but just keep walking around and just say, if you need a hug, I'm here. If you don't want to eat the banana, that's fine too. Just let me know, and just let it out of their system. Just let them work through it. And if it's something where you can redirect them, for toddlers, you often can, right? A very young toddler, you can be like, look, fire truck. And they're like, over to the next thing. So that's great. And obviously, if it's like a safety thing or you're in public, like they're screaming in a restaurant, you might need to remove them, but I wouldn't even really address it. It's just like they had a meltdown because they're 2. And so you left the restaurant, took a little breather, had some water, we are fine. And if they're older than 3, I would first, especially with siblings, it is so hard. I struggle with this. I don't know a parent who doesn't. Even if you have like a pre-toddler, like an 18-month-old and a 3-year-old, and the older one is like grabbing toys from them, take a step back first and watch it and determine if you actually need to do something. Because there will be times where like there's a back and forth and a tussle, but like they need to work things out, right? That you don't want your kids to be like tattletales to, and it's like they just come up and tell you every time the other person did something wrong and you have to go down and intervene. You want them to like learn to work things out, and frankly you want the little one to learn to stand up for themselves, which they will. Like, at some point they grab the toy back, and then your older one learns like, okay, maybe don't always grab his toys because it's going to happen to you too. And if you do need to intervene, avoid the long scripts. Like, if they don't need a mini therapy session, it is in one ear out the other at those younger ages. And especially in the moment, if they're really dysregulated, even if it's like a 5 or 6-year-old who's old enough to like conceptualize and understand what you're saying, they're not in the headspace. It's like if you were in the middle of like yelling at your partner and you're like so upset, you're not ready to like sit on the couch and have a therapy session. You're like in your head. And it's the same thing with little kids. So instead, if you do have like a 3 and up, a child who might need a consequence, and I'm going to stay away from saying what those consequences are, because Again, I think it's very personal. Like, don't hit them, please. It's personal to each family what type, people do time out, they do time in. It's personal to you. But I would be really clear. Like, so much of this advice is like, to be clear is to be kind, right? Like, you have your house rules, you have your values, you want your kids to know what's expected of them. And then if they don't do it, they have a chance to change their behavior, right? So let's say you have a kid who is like, your toddler is throwing a ball. They're throwing balls, and that's one of your house rules. Then you give them a warning because they're human, right? So it's like, buddy, if you keep throwing the ball, we're gonna have to take the ball away until tomorrow. Give them a minute. If they throw it again, you calmly go take the ball. They might melt down, and you're like, I told you we don't throw balls in the house. That's one of our rules, and you can have your ball back tomorrow. So it's a logical consequence, right? I think focusing on, and this is really hard sometimes because sometimes it's hard to figure out what is a logical consequence, but a logical consequence means it's tied to the activity they're doing, to their behavior. So being like, if you don't stop throwing that ball, no dessert. For like a 3-year-old, they're like, what? Like, first of all, they might get dessert anyway, but they're not, that feels too far away. Dessert would happen in like 6 hours. We're not going to go to the zoo tomorrow if you don't stop crying. Like, first of all, they're dysregulated. They're going to cry anyway. And again, it's too far away. It's not tied to their behavior. So, really trying to find consequences that are tied to what they're doing so they can process it. And then really try, even if they get upset in that moment, like, you took the ball away, you put the ball on a shelf, and then you move on. So, again, you're not like gaslighting them and being like, why are you crying? But you're like, I know, buddy, I know you want to play with the ball. And I know that tomorrow you're not going to throw it in the house so we can play more. Okay, so you know what we should do? We should watch a movie. It's movie night. Or like, let's go upstairs and have dinner. And you focus on the good kid. You're not sitting there being like, I cannot believe you did that again. That's the 5th time I've told you not to throw balls, which is creating a sense of like shame. And it's focusing on the wrong thing, right? Like, that whole concept of whatever you water, like the what is it? The flowers you water are the ones that grow, right? So like, the more you focus on the good, the more it's reinforced, and the more you focus on the bad, the more that's reinforced. And I do think that really is true. Um, so looking ahead, so your kids did get in a fight, your toddler was going crazy, melting down nonstop. In the moment, you handled it succinctly, but then afterwards, I do think it's worth pausing and reflecting. So I would first think if there is a reason why these things are happening. And sometimes there isn't, like, don't overthink it. But I will sometimes have parents say, and it could be behavioral stuff. I actually had a call this morning with a mom who's struggling with a 2-year-old's tantrums. And I was like, can you think of like specific times this seems to happen? We were actually able to pinpoint that these like horrific meltdowns that this kid was having were always in these large group settings. She's like, it doesn't happen in like public in like an amusement park, but if they have these like big family dinners a lot, and she's like, when there's a lot of people there and there are people who know him and are talking to him, he just loses his shit. Like, she was realizing that actually is when it happens. So then you're able to manage it and be like, okay, is he overstimulated? Are we doing these events too late at night and he's just exhausted? Sometimes there is a reason, right? Or it's like, it's always when I'm feeding the baby, there's something about the feeding that bothers them. And just being able to identify any sort of back context to it can help you manage, like, what can we do to make this happen less frequently? It again, isn't always the case, but it sometimes is. Repair is so important. It is not realistic or fair for any parent to expect that they are never going to raise their voice. They're never going to be short tempered. They're never going to say the wrong thing. Like, we are human beings. Like, we allow our kids to make mistakes. We are allowed to make mistakes. But if there's one skill you want to teach your kids, like, think about the person who can't say they're sorry. Is there any worse person? They just like, they're always right. Like, no, I don't apologize. Right. So you want your kids to grow up knowing that you're human. That's also going to make it more likely for them to come to you for advice. And when they make mistakes, because you haven't like set this standard that like, do as I say, I'm always right. You're just the kid. So you're like, I am so sorry I raised my voice. You know what? Even though you guys were misbehaving, mama should not have talked to you like that. And I want to do better. That's something I'm working on. It's a really good thing to model for them. And I also think it's good to commiserate with your child. If you can identify why these things are happening, and maybe they're things you can't necessarily change, even for like a 3-year-old, you can say, sweetie, I know it's tough that you used to be with mama all day and now you have a baby brother and he is loud. He's really loud. I get it. And it hurts my ears too when he cries sometimes. And I'm sorry, that's hard. And I just want you to know how much I love you and that I understand why that's hard. Like, I've even had that conversation with my oldest son because his brother will bait him. And I know I was an oldest. My sister would bait me. And then I would, freak out and hit her or something, and I would get in trouble. And I've had those conversations with him at bedtime after he's gotten a punishment for doing something to his brother. I've said, listen, I get it. He tries to get you to do that. I watch him do it, and that's why he's also in trouble. But listen, if you can not, do this is going to help, because you are going to get in trouble if you hit him, but you can commiserate with them. And I think kids really, really appreciate that. Like, you're humanizing their experience, right? Like, I know the first day of school is tough. I never wanted to go to the first day of school, like whatever the things are. Always finding like little pockets of time, not in the moment. It's later on when they're not in their head and you're not in your head, that you're reflecting with them. And then anytime a kid is struggling, my first suggestion for any parent is to look at that emotional piggy bank again and be like, you know what? To me, everything's great, but I am realizing that with the baby here, like, we used to go on these walks like 2 or 3 times a week, and we just haven't had time to do them. I'm going to prioritize finding a way to do those walks with him, even if it kills me, because I can see the difference that it makes when he gets just like a little bit of time with me. Um, okay. So that I want to make sure I have time for questions in the last few minutes. Thank you guys. I'm going to send you an email with information how to work with me if you need support with parenting, sleep, potty. But in the meantime, yeah, any questions that you guys have?
Yeah, so Brittany, we'll follow up with all of that info, including the resource specifically for siblings. So just send that to me, and then we'll send it in the follow-up DM and the follow-up email.
Great.
It looks like we answered all of the questions as we went. So this was
Amazing.
so helpful for me personally. So I can't
Good.
imagine how helpful it was for other people too. And I know you're off to a class recital of some sort. So
It never stops.
it
Yeah.
never stops. I don't even know how you do it with one, let alone three.
Well, you
Um,
get time. Nothing happens all at once. You get time. You get a second, and then you get a third.
yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, and we'll
Of
see
course.
you next week for another amazing
Yes.
virtual event.
Yes. And now that you've learned about siblings, next week we're going to do one that is all about finding those pockets of time with your kids. And I have some
Yep.
very fun special ideas for you guys if you
Can't
need them.
wait. All
Right.
right. Bye, Brittany. Bye, everyone.
Bye.